Hey there, Dungeon Acid. Today we're going to be looking at probably the coolest book in my Dungeons & Dragons book collection, and that is the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual. You can see this is the one with art that is certainly reminiscent of an era, but also, humble brag, could probably do better than it. Some of the stuff looks really cool, but some of the stuff is just has this wonderful old school quality that you certainly don't see in D&D books today. You can also notice just how thin this book is compared to D&D books today. But as the back points out, over 350 monsters are contained within. So let's pop it open and take a look. Alrighty, here's the front cover. Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. You can see these knights, straight up, swords and chivalry, knight in shining armor style knights, and they're fighting a ballet. Copyright here is 1979. Definitely reminiscent of a different era, especially take a look at the text also as well. Really just goes to show how this was, when it came out, a lot more just... hey, wouldn't it be cool if knights were in the same world with magic and monsters and Greek mythology? We just put it all in the same world and see what comes out. We have a foreword by Gary Gygax, some A to Z description of what's going to be in the Monster Manual. One really cool thing about this is that there are a lot of monsters that are in current D&D that can be found in this book, which is fun to see their evolution. It's also fun to see a lot of monsters that didn't make it out of this edition or up to 5th edition, where we are now, and kind of see what those monsters are like, and if those would be fun to run in current D&D and kind of convert. I also think it's interesting just the style of the book and the kind of difference in how the monsters are described, how their stats and their information is laid out. All right, so as you can see here, we get into the meat of the book, the monsters. You got your Ergel Servant is the first up, but there's also stuff just straight up like ape, right? It's just hey, you might want to run King Kong in your game, so here's an ape. There's Axebeak, which is like a big ostrich that'll attack you. It has ant, and then the depiction for the ant is just awesome because these giant ants, this knight, and the ants are carrying away this unfortunate adventurer here. Just super evocative. Here's a Onkeg and its description. Now, right off the bat, you can see that the stats that they give in AD&D are not at all the same that they give in, sorry for shaky there, in current D&D. First of all, they're not going to give the strength, dex, con, and whiz, charisma of monsters. Those weren't a consideration. I don't know what the reasoning was behind that, if they just didn't think it was relevant or necessary, but I also kind of think that it's reminiscent of the fact that that scale of 1 to 20 and the 3d6 getting a little bell curve average around 10 is more of a human scale. These scores are representative of what humans can do, and that's why they're adjusted for different races that elves are 2 above the bell curve for humans on dexterity or something like that. And the monsters really aren't meant to be graphed on that same chart, which is kind of an interesting notion, especially when you consider when you get these giant monsters in current D&D, and it's their strength is 20, their intelligence is 20, and their all this other stuff, and you're it's good to know that information, but maybe they're kind of being ham-fisted into the same scale, and it would be more welcome to just know that they are superhuman intelligent. They are more intelligent than a human will ever be, and this is what they can do, so on and so forth. You can also see that there are a lot of stats given that are no longer given in D&D. Frequency, which is interesting, so how rare this thing is. It's number appearing, and that's something we'll see throughout this book that is another characteristic of old school D&D is that you used to be fighting a lot more monsters than we're used to now. There was no crafting an encounter to be balanced with the party that's gonna be fought. It was like, oh, you come across, Onkeg or a number of Onkegs. Well, then there's gonna be 1 to 6. So roll a d6, and if you encounter 6 Onkegs, you guys better be ready to turn tail and run out of there, because that's going to be a pretty deadly fight. They also don't have an attack bonus. I think that it's just meant that you would roll based on whatever the THAC0 of the person you're trying to hit is, and then you would have their damage specified. So the damage isn't specified in dice, it's specified in a number range. For instance, this one is damage is 3 to 18. So, that's would be a 3d6. A lot more math involved. Baboon. If you needed the stats for a baboon or a badger, here we go. Here's a basilisk, another classic D&D monster, and that art, I can't throw any shade at that art. That's really cool. Bear. Giant beetle. And look at this. This might be, I know it's small, but it might be one of my favorite pieces of art in this entire book. And it's just this massive beetle, just moseying on through this little town or village, or maybe it's just some guy's little hut. But imagine walking out of your hut one day and just seeing a giant beetle. And that's kind of another thing that it's just so evocative of maybe it's old school fairy tales or just high fantasy in general. Before, I guess, D&D perpetuated its own tropes that kind of made its own mark on the fantasy genre. And so it's why wouldn't, well, of course we got the giant beetles, they come around. Of course we have the beholder. The B section would not be complete without the beholder, and that is the AD&D art. Not as simplistic or strange looking as the original beholder art, but definitely different than our current iteration. You can see the paragraphs of description they have about the beholder, including the different things that their eye rays can do: charm person, charm monster, sleep, telekinesis. Telekinesis, 2,500 GP of weight. So that's another thing in AD&D, that the weight is measured in gold pieces. So they can carry with that telekinesis ray up to 2,500 pieces of gold. A brownie, kind of the brethren of a gnome, forest gnome, I suppose. The brain mole. There's some art for a brain mole. The bugbear, belay. The carrion crawler, of course, another classic D&D monster. Even in this early iteration, has its special attack to paralyze people. All right, let's take a look here. I'm just gonna start flipping through these pages more. Centaur, Coatl. The Demigorgon. I've never watched Stranger Things, but here's the inspiration, I suppose. A Mane. It's a sub-demon. Pretty creepy, actually, drawing of a Mane here. Apologize for my less than professional presentation of this. Succubus. Very sexualized, obviously. And this is 1970s, late 70s, but nonetheless, we're now into all the demons, pit fiends. Believe this is a version that has been scrubbed clean of any less than Christian stuff. The devils, so they're still talking about devils, but haven't seen any pentagrams or anything. It's dinosaurs. Another thing that really just should be in more fantasy is dinosaurs, because dinosaurs are cool. The Displacer Beast Here's a, almost looks like a old school Walt Disney black and white image. Doppelganger. Now this is a creepy looking doppelganger. And of course you have your dragons. Black dragons, brass dragons, green dragons, all the different types of dragons. I think that early D&D really went wild with the dragon etymology, and since then I've never been a fan of following the monster manual lore on monsters because I feel like it's predictable, and so I don't like that whole like, oh well, a dragon spews this out of its mouth and it does this, and so its characteristics are probably this. It's like, man, dragons, no one barely even knows what dragons are. People have heard tell of them. You could count, there's like 5% chance of encountering anyone who's even seen a dragon, let alone faced a dragon. How do they have all this knowledge about dragons? Anyway, that's a bit of my rant. Look at this frog. Look at him. He's chilling out. Dwarves, hill giants, frost giants, goblin. Take a look at this goblin. That's a goblin, all right. There is the eternal controversy of how to play your goblins, and I very much like the gross but cute Pathfinder style of goblin, but such an evocative creature. You can just run in so many different ways. Hellhound, harpy. That's not appropriate. Hobgoblin. Still pretty much, on par with what we have for hobgoblins today. Can you pronounce this? Because I can't. Intellect Devourer, though. That guy's in here. The zany monsters. The brainy monsters. That is some cool looking artwork for a Jackalware. I don't think that we've the Jackalware is the run enough as a lycanthrope. Here's some full page artwork of a battle with kobolds, it looks like. And yeah, it's pretty cool. You can see just how everything is they're wearing shining armor, it's very historical. But then it's these figures from history, like a Roman centurion or something. But he's transported in this strange land with these little kobold creatures. Lamia. The Lich. That is some cool artwork. Lich right next to this goofy leprechaun artwork. That's right. Leprechauns are in the old school monster manual. Let's take a listen here. Leprechauns normally dwell only in fair green lands with lush hills and dales for them to frolic through. Side note, of course, why wouldn't they? I love frolicking. Occasionally, a party of adventurers will reside. Occasionally, a party of adventurous ones will reside elsewhere for a time. These small creatures of magical talent and mischievous nature can become invisible at will, polymorph non-living objects, create illusions, and ventriloquism spells as often as they like. Their keen ears prevent them from being surprised, and being full of mischief, they will often snatch valuable objects from persons while invisible and dash away. 75% chance, it has in parentheses, of that happening. We should bring leprechauns back. Come on. Leprechauns are sound like an amazing encounter. Before the lizard folk, there was the lizard man, and that is cool. I love playing lizard folk as PCs. I will never never deny someone who wants to play a lizard folk. I think Skyrim or just Elder Scrolls series in general, really Oblivion, kind of sold me at a young age on the idea of lizard folk as a playable race. Medusa, just not a Gorgon, just Medusa. Oh, and here's the whole page on men. Of course, it's the 70s, so when it says men, it means humans. But it has cavemen, dervish, which are nomadic men, it looks like, merchants, pilgrims. Some very evocative old school art for what a party traveling might look like, or what encountering a group of men might be. And just the description, I mean, like, you know, even for things like merchants, it's like the rules are woven within the description. So it says, instead of, you know, subdividing it and being like, roll this, and then you can determine what they have, it's like, merchants are, as the name implies, traders in goods and the like. These traders travel in caravans. Pack animals and or wagons are used from city to city in order to do business. They're found nearly everywhere. Only 10% of any band of merchants will actually be tradesmen, however. 10% will be drovers. The balance, 80% of the party, will be mercenary guards. So it gives you like stats like that for figuring out the exact number of who will be merchants and guards and whatnot. I mean, honestly, today, I would just rather hand wave and be like, okay, yeah, there's one merchant guy, there's an assistant, 6 guards, and 2 drovers or whatever. A merman. Merman is in here, which is cool. Mimics. And of course, the mimic art has a treasure chest, although it's not reaching out to bite rather than just reaching out to punch, it looks like. And then a surprise to me finding in this was the mind flayers have been a thing for this long, but they indeed have. And they have this cool evocative piece of art here, right there. And but then later on, this like almost, it looks like a boomer cartoon version of a mind flayer as he's casting the spell on this hapless, bug-eyed cartoon figure. But hey, I love cartoons and drawing cartoons, so the Minotaur mold. Very cool. Mummy. The Naga. This Naga is just I don't know, very surreal, but very much like the Naga we have. This mummy's like, hey, what's happening? Mummy up in the corner. Reading through this is just, can give you so many good ideas. You don't even need to use the stats. I mean, honestly, you can still use the stats because it doesn't really give you stats like the way we think of stats. For instance, orc here, which number one, they look way more like pigmen. Orcs, you could use the stats from the 5th edition Monster Manual for like what their actual in-game statistics will be like, but use all of this stuff for to create an old school feel of finding them. For example, frequency for orc is common, number appearing 30 to 300. That's right. There's a chance you could come across 300 orcs in old school D&D, and that is not an encounter that you fight. That is an encounter you run away from. Yeah. Alignment, lawful, evil, intelligence, average, in parentheses, low. No psionic ability. We have piercers, porcupine, which I'm glad that got an entry. Pixie, and this is not the pixie in this is far darker, it appears, than in it's up here, sorry. He's trying to stab this guy's heels. Rakshasa. The purple worm, as we saw in the back, yet again, massive creature. Hit dice 15. She would be rolling 15 d6s, I believe, or maybe d8s to create its hit points. Rakshasa, we got a Rakshasa smoking a pipe. This is just, that's awesome art too. Rakshasa. Rock grubs, and like, you know, even with its kind of a little bit cartooniness, like this is a very disturbing picture. Look at the rot grubs as they go through his arm. You can just show that to your players and be like, this is what's happening to you, and immediately get a visceral reaction of them being like, I don't want that to happen to me. There's a Sahuagin who looks like he's scratching his butt. And that's cool, Sahuagin were in here for so long. Satyrs and or fawns. Skeletons, hags, your shambling mound, which looks more like a swamp thing than it does what we typically think of shambling mounds today. Giant slug, and what an awesome image too. Here we go. Got this giant slug chasing after this adventurer who's just like, I'm getting out of here, which is true. I mean, like, that's what you should do. All right, giant spider, and just awesome art using the white to actually draw the characters and have everything being black. Look at this. Sorry, there's the spider, and then the party of adventurers unknowingly walking into its lair. A fighter with a torch, a wizard. Looks like a halfling rogue back there, and a dwarf. Very evocative and very cool. Sturge. And pictures of a sturge sucking the blood out of an adventurer. You get the feeling that like some of these had more were different artists or just had more money put into them. Still, you know, very, very cool. A toad just eating a guy, giant toad, eating lunch. Tiger, troglodytes, treants, vampire. Now here's one of the ones I was excited to get to. It's the Umber Hulk in what is probably just, you know, the worst, not the worst, but just not as cool of artwork that we versus what we have today. Because this I would not be afraid to fight and or possibly make fun of as an adventurer. Whereas the current Umber Hulk would send me sprinting away in revulsion and fear. But this Umber Hulk looks like a McDonald's toy, or it looks like the Hamburglar or something. Not the Hamburglar, but the purple guy. Whites, Yetis, zombies, Zorn, which honestly, this is a creepier, like almost Cthulhu, Lovecraftian Zorn than the like more monster one we have looking today. The one in the monster manual now is like, and I think this one as well, the Zorn only eat like rock. I totally change it and have the Zorn just be a terrifying monster because it looks terrifying in the monster manual today. Anyway, here's another great, awesome piece of art of adventurers, and you know, opening a chest and looking on in excitement. Then the rest of the appendix, you have your treasure types and what to roll on, and other descriptions of what goes on what page. More of a strange piece of art that's like a naga and some sort of ogre and a gargoyle versus the strange adventurer. I don't know really what's going on. There's a centipede on the ground. And it says other fantasy and science fiction titles from TSR. The Player's Handbook. Dungeon Master's Guide, The Monster Manual, Deities and Demigods, The Dungeon Master's Screen, The World of Greyhawk. Modules. G1, The Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. G2, The Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. Hall of the Fire Giant King. Descent into the Depths of the Earth. Shrine of the Kuatoa. Vault of the Drow. Tomb of Horrors, S1. White Blue Mountain. Expedition to the Buried Peaks, S1, 2, and 3. Very cool. And an ad for Gen Con. Yes. If you're a gamer of any type, there's an annual event you should know. about no matter what your particular area of interest is. This event is Gen Con, America's premier game convention and trade show, sponsored by TSR Hobbies Incorporated and held in August of every year at a location in southwestern Wisconsin. Over 2,000 enthusiasts gather annually for this gaming extravaganza. That's probably about how much they have these days, right? 2,000? Which runs events and features detailing with all facets of the hobby: tournaments, general gaming, exhibits, auctions, seminars, movies, miniatures, board games, role-playing events, plus special celebrity guests, prizes, and trophies. It all adds up to 4 days of gaming that you won't want to miss, so make your plans now to attend. Inquiries regarding Gen Con for any particular year should be made between March 1st and August 1st by writing to Gen Con, POB 756, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin 53147. TSR Hobbies. Very cool. Do you think if I mail them, they're still going to respond? Well, very, very awesome book. I love to look through it and get inspired. Not run an advanced D&D game. It's a bit daunting to me. I run my own bastardized version of 5th edition, but certainly I love to take bits and pieces from stuff, and just take a look at that owlbear and tell me that this book isn't cool. Roll on.